Had a good visit with him, and Bob's going to stay in there with her the whole time. She said, when he got his knee done, I stayed in here with him, so now it's his turn, so he ain't leaving. So that was, you know, what, they've been married over 70 years.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if you think, I've not even been alive 55. So when he's been, what is that? I don't know, somebody do the math. That's almost 20 years more than I've been alive. So I enjoyed, they're a good couple. Hard to find people married that long. All right, anybody else? I know Robert Mason, him and his family come. They're the ones that moved from Arizona. On Tuesday, he'd been battling some chest issues, and his wife called me. He was pretty bad off, could hardly crawl in the car. So I took him over to the emergency room in Tenova. And I tell you what, when you see, it was a little bit iffy whether or not I was going to stop and call an ambulance, because he was that far out of it. I was like, man, you can't be checking out on my car, right? But got some cold air on him. We made it there. And in 2 hours, they gave him a chest X-ray, an EKG, pumped him full of antibiotics, diagnosed him with pneumonia, and got us back out in under 2 hours. I'd never seen, we were so well taken. And the doctor walked in, and I asked him, I don't know what, triggered me to do that, but I said, hey, you ever take a mission trip? He said, I spent some time in Togo. He's currently in the Air Force, flies for the Air Force, and he's a doctor. I'm like, one of those is enough, right? He's doing both of them. So anyway, God just took care of him. He's home, but he's still pretty weak with that. So if you pray for Robert, the Lord will help him get better. Anybody else tonight?
Kristen Crom Walker had her back surgery. They said it went well. So still pray for her recovery.
Okay. Anybody else?
Brother Day, he remember my brother Joe, prayer too as well, and remember me and my family as well.
Okay. Okay. All right. Anybody else? Sandy?
I have a special unspoken request, and also remember Miss Martha, she's traveling to see Pete. He was in the hospital.
Right. So Pete's journey is back on again. He had some problems, went to the ER on Friday. They did all kinds of stuff, said he was good to go. I talked to him last night. He was in the hospital waiting to be seen. He said it felt like somebody punched him in his chest, and his arm was hurting him. So there's something going on, right? And they can't figure out what it is. So he was back in there last night. He was supposed to call me this morning, and I haven't heard from him. So
I saw Miss Martha this afternoon. She said that they determined he had a touch of pneumonia, and his oxygen level is really low. So she asked me to pray for the CPAP machine.
yeah,
That
VA.
veterinarian. Sorry.
That's the problem. He's going to a veterinarian.
Get to him, so, but it's all connected to the disease he has coming.
Okay. All right.
Austin's fiance Morgan, her grandfather is pretty ill right now. They don't know if he's gonna pull out of it or not, but he's raised her, so.
Okay. All right. Anybody else?
Remember Macy, she's getting married on the 14th. Almost half my family, I guess all of them, we're all flying down here, so remember Macy prayer.
Okay. And that's the 14th? All right.
He's having some dental work done today, so still having time with his down there.
Okay.
Remember praying for him.
And when do you leave, Chris? Oh, you fly out on the 14th too? And then I fly out on the 17th to Australia. So the missionary, Tom Gonderman, you guys know him. He's been through here and he's one of our missionaries. So I'm going to go out and preach a mission conference for him. In Australia, of course, this is a big country. Their minimum wage in Australia is $21 an hour. The Australian dollar to the US dollar is only off about 10 cents. So Tom's rent is $800 every week is what he pays for rent. So I mean, you have to make money or you're not living in Australia, right? So but there's very for how big. I mean, people there make really good money. Of course, I think we're starting to see a little bit of that. We're almost going to have to do that here before too long with inflation going up. But there's only a very small. There's less than, what did he say? Less than 40 independent Baptist churches in Australia. In Sydney, the largest population are ethnic, coming from everywhere. The Philippines, you name it. They all converge on Sydney from all around the world. So there's a growing need for churches, but more importantly, because they are different financially than, say, where I'm at in Africa, they also have an opportunity to give. Like he picked up a missionary in his church that's being sent out of his church, and he's a church planner. They're just covering his rent, and his rent's $800 a month. So that church is able to cover that guy's rent as a church planner. So they're at that point where they're ready to branch out and start doing some more mission stuff. They're in that area where they can hit Thailand easy, they can hit Indonesia easy. It's right there. You send an American over there, to do it, it's a lot more difficult. But if your home base is Australia, you can reach out to that part. I mean, Papua New Guinea is a 2-hour flight, right? Papua New Guinea is about as third world. It's like, that would still be, pioneer missions would still be like Papua New Guinea, Africa, of course, the Amazon. There's still tribes in Papua New Guinea that have never been visited by a missionary, but that country's like this, right? So there's no roads. You got to get there in an airplane. It's just very, very difficult. But if the churches in Australia could get burdened and for that area of missions, they would be able to take that and lead that. So not only do I get to go visit, and Lord willing, we'll be able to do a live stream back here from there, and then also be able to encourage his church to push out further. So, but that'll be, I fly out not this Monday, but next Monday. So there'll be a lot of people traveling in the month of June. Anybody else? Yeah.
I have a wedding in the middle of Wisconsin this weekend. I'm going to be driving, and I'm having problems with my driving.
Okay. Are you riding with John?
No.
Oh, okay.
I'll stay here.
But it's just, to make that trip.
Okay. All right, anybody else? And that's Carly Chambers? Okay. All right, anybody else? Okay, yeah, that's gonna be on us quick. Randy's church called us. They're doing a mission-themed vacation Bible school where they're setting it up like an airplane, and the airplane visits a different missionary in Zambia is going to be one of those missionaries, And so they're going to do it like each night will be an in-flight movie, like if you're on an airplane. And, you know, internationally, they always have those movies there. So we'll be one of the in-flight movies. So, and then right after that, he'll be coming here helping us with ours. So, and I think there's, of course, all across this county, you know, there's lots of opportunities. Almost every week from here to the end, there's some place a kid could go and to a VBS around here. So that's cool, you know. They do matter, you know. Kids get saved in them. And all right, anybody else tonight?
I want to thank the Lord for his blessings and mercy. Let's pray for families that have trouble.
Okay. Anybody else tonight? Yeah.
Well, I'm still respectful of that. Yeah, my fiance was good, and we're still trying. Yeah, I feel like we got one very good. Thanks a lot. Keep me in prayer.
Okay. What's your name?
Bronson,
I can't hear you.
Bronson,
Broxon? Bronson. All right, Bronson. Good to have you back. All right. Anybody else tonight?
would remember I went across the guy this evening that he was telling me about his mother. She was battling stage 4 cancer and stuff was spread. And they're not really involved.
This is a guy at your work?
No, it's my cousin's this week.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? All right. All right. Let's go ahead in the Lord in prayer. Father, thank you for tonight. And Lord, just thank you for being able to be back here again. And Lord, I just never want to ever forget about what a privilege it is to be able to pray. Lord, it's because of what you did. The Bible says that we can boldly come before the throne of grace. And I like how that is called the throne of grace. Because if it was a throne of judgment, we couldn't stand there. But it's a throne of grace because of Jesus. And you don't see us for who we are. You see us because of who Jesus is. Lord, thank you that you would even want to mess with humanity to save them. You made us. It was like you could have just, wadded up the blueprint and started again, but you didn't. And Lord, you gave us a way to get back to you. And Lord, I know we're thinking about our country. I know that you have a plan. And I know you're actively pursuing that plan. I know what the end is. The end has every one of your children in heaven. And Lord, one day there'll be a new heaven and a new earth. That's the end. And Lord, you're actively working on that. And we just need to trust that. And Lord, I pray for our country. First off, for every Christian, that you would just give us the peace to be able to just put it in your hand and not worry about it. Lord, we're going to do our duty and vote, and although that might be harder this year. But then, ultimately, we're just going to trust you. Lord, from the economy to what happens around the world and all parts in between, no matter what road that takes, you always take care of your children. And we can count on that. And I pray that we would do that. And Lord, at that throne of grace, we want to make sure that we recognize that we are sinners and need forgiveness. So I pray you would forgive us this week where we fail you. Lord, that we would not just ask for forgiveness, but actively seek victory in our lives and in our families' lives to just draw closer to you. And Lord, I just think of the prayer request tonight of OB and his surgery. Lord, I know he's been battling some things that have really been heavy on him. And I pray that this procedure would help. And Lord, that it wouldn't make it worse, Lord, but there would be a difference, and he'd be able to put all the health issues behind him, and that you would just be with everything that needs to take place tomorrow, and that you would let him know that he is loved. Father, he's very faithful here. He doesn't miss. And Lord, I just pray that you would be with him and help him. Lord, for Violet and Bob, they would be here on a Wednesday night. Lord, they don't miss either. But Violet's broke her leg, And Lord, I just thank you that couple is a good example to us. Lord, I know they're not perfect, but they sure do show us what faithfulness, sticking with it, not giving up, being married for over 70 years. And Lord, that even right now, he won't leave her side. And Lord, that's a beautiful thing. I pray you be with Violet. Help each day in that nursing home to pass quickly. I pray that her rehab would go smooth and she might even be able to get out of there early. I just pray that you would also be with Bob as he's there in an encouragement to her. For Robert this week that struggled with pneumonia and had to go to the hospital yesterday, I pray that you would continue to help him feel better. For Kristen Walker and Lord, her health issue, and Lord, the continuing need in her life, and I pray that you would meet that. And Lord, that even though we don't know these folks, I know that you can impress it on their heart that they are being prayed for. For Jamie's brother Joe, Lord, who has cancer, but you've helped it. At first, it didn't look like it was going to be very good, and that's been some time now. The calendar keeps turning over, and he's still here, and I want to thank you, Father, for that. And Lord, I know Jamie loves his brother, and I know that he's thankful he knows his brother's saved. And Lord, I pray that every time they're together, that would be sweet fellowship. But you'd also just encourage Joe's heart, and Lord, that you would walk with him each day. And also I pray for Jamie's family, and Lord, and I just pray that you would use him to be a light and example. And then Lord, for families in general today, just trying to navigate a lost world, that you would give us guidance to do so. For Lord, I just continue to pray for Sandy and her prayer request, and one of them was Martha's husband, Pete. And Lord, I know Pete's struggling again with his health, and I ask, Lord, over and over again, he's gone, he has chest pains, his arm hurts, they check it and there's nothing. Lord, I just pray that you would give him the answers that he needs, and that you would help Sandy in a prayer request she's praying for. And I know Jerry prays for his family. Also wanted to thank and give praise for Grace, and thank you for that, for Morgan's grandfather, Lord, who's got health issues, and Lord's not doing really well. I just pray that young lady just moved here, that you would comfort her heart, use Chris and his family to be an example to her about what the peace of Jesus Christ can do in somebody's heart. And I just pray that you would be with her grandfather. I pray for Macy getting married and a new family beginning to start, and all the West that will be traveling to Colorado, and Brenda. And Lord, I'm just thankful they get to do that. And I pray that you would be with all of that traveling that has to happen. Lord, that there would be safety, and they would be a good time together as family. And when then that whole family converges in that area, Lord, I pray that the light would be evident, and that would you use them to be a witness to the people around them. Lord, I pray for Sarah, who also has to travel because of a wedding this week and driving all that way by herself. I pray that you would give her grace and peace as she does that. For Chris, as he's going to be traveling to the UK for business, and then shortly after that I leave for Australia. And Lord, it's amazing that we can move around the globe with such ease today, but also to understand it is a tremendous tool to spread the gospel. I pray you be with Tom's church as we have this mission conference, that you already begin to work in their hearts and lives. Lord, to have a church that many miles away, Lord, just as he strengthens it and rebuilds it, Lord, that those people would, as they begin to get on fire for reaching the lost, they get on fire for the people around them. They are much closer to a lot of places in the world that seem so far away from us. The Philippines is a short flight. Lord, it wouldn't be any different than going to California for us. Lord, there's so many doors of opportunity. I pray that you'd use the churches in Australia and Tom's church in general, that you'd be with the preaching, each message that's preached, and Lord, that you would just again be with the traveling. Lord, Greg, as he's had some work at a dentist, and Lord, that's never a fun thing. And Lord, I pray as healing takes place and everything that has to get done, Lord, that you would help that to heal, that there'd be no pain, and Lord, it would go quick and easy, and that you'd relieve that burden from him. And Lord, I pray for this the prayer request that Beth made for that young lady who had her thyroid removed. Lord, I pray that having that done in itself is going to have some ramifications. And Lord, I pray as a doctor gives medicine and stuff to help her replace her thyroid, Lord, that when she goes in for that scan, Lord, I pray, you are a lifter of burdens. And that young lady's thinking about that tonight. And she's praying. And Lord, I pray that you would just let that scan come back clean. If you choose to not do that, then I pray you'd give that young lady the grace to be able to deal with that, and that you would use it for your honor and glory. But we know that you can do that. And Lord, we have these heavy hearts, and we're going to read about somebody tonight who's going through that. And Lord, I pray and ask that you would just continue to work there for Ted and the person he mentioned with stage 4 cancer, a friend of his cousin. Again, Lord, that would be, without knowing you, that certainly would be a dark hole to look at. I don't know if this person's a believer or not, but I pray you'd use Ted and his family to be a blessing to them. All across Scott County in the next couple of months, including even this week, there are vacation Bible schools going on. It's a chance to reach kids that maybe their parents don't even take them to church, but they get to go to vacation Bible school. Whatever Bible school's going on, I ask and pray that the light of the gospel would go out. Lord, we live in a blessed area where we can have that many. And Lord, that there is Christianity on every corner. I pray you'd use these churches, each teacher as they spend time with that kid. And thank you that you've given us a slot. We get to do that also. When our week comes around, I pray that you would help us to approach that time with great humbleness, to know that you would even give us kids like that to be able to love on for a week. Lord, that we would do that in place of you, that they would know there's a God in heaven that cares about them. Enough, Lord, that a church would focus its whole attention for the whole entire week on nothing but kids. I pray you be with each worker as we do that you give the strength for the journey, and that you would use that in a way that would be honor and glory unto you. Lord, we love you. We thank you for the things that you do for us. I pray you'd be with the lesson tonight in Job. We ask this in your precious name. Amen. If you do that, we'll go ahead and turn to the book of Job. I hope you get a chance to read ahead. And we'll start in Job chapter 7. Job chapter 7, and just as a little recap, the things that Job is going through is because God looked at Job, and Satan said, when he went to visit God in heaven, and he said, well, what are you doing? He said, I'm going to and fro and back and forth the earth. And he said, have you considered my servant Job? And I'm thinking, man, leave my name out of that, right? That's just an odd thing where God would say to somebody, Satan's saying that there are no real Christians, that they're only doing that because you take care of them. And then God says, but that's not so in this person's life. Thank the Lord that there was somebody God had confidence in. Thank the Lord for that. You look at, that could be a message. Thank the Lord for Noah, right? Thank the Lord for Peter. Thank the Lord for guys like Job in the Bible. When there wasn't anybody else, he didn't give Satan a list of 20 names he could choose from. Gave him one. I wonder today how many people he would have real confidence in. If we can't navigate day-to-day stuff that's easy, how are we going to navigate losing all your kids, all your finances, and being critically ill for days on end, right? unfortunately, we fail so easy that, there's probably not a huge list here either, that he could say, hey, I guarantee you this one's real. Or I guarantee you this one's, you could test him and he's going to remain faithful. Well, that's what this whole story is about. So he's deep into it. The reason why this isn't ending, it's not like he got boils and then they went away in 2 days. This is a long, I don't even know how many days he had to suffer like that. But each day he's suffering, Satan is, if God said, okay, you could only do it 2 days, Satan would say, well, that's not long enough. So what he's doing is he's making it impossible where Satan has to admit Job's spot on. So this isn't going to go away overnight. Then you got his friends who constantly want to tell Job, well, this is why you're sick. So that's where we're at in chapter 7. Is there not an appointed time to man upon earth or not? Let me see. I think we did set. I'm trying to think where we left off. No, let's go ahead and pick up in chapter 8, because I think we got through most of 7. Then answered Bildad the Shuhite and said, how long wilt thou speak these things, and how long shall thy words of thy mouth be like a strong wind? Doth God pervert judgment, or doth the Almighty pervert justice? Okay, so he starts out in verse 8. Of course, Job is, going through, he doesn't know why this is happening. And then his friend says, how long wilt thou speak these things, and how long shall thy words of thy mouth be like a strong wind? Doth God pervert judgment, or doth the Almighty pervert justice? If thy children have sinned against him, and he have cast them out away from their transgression. So he's saying, now we know this. We know that Job did go and he did sacrifice and he did go to God because of his kids. So this lets you know a little bit. Maybe his kids were not as strong of a Christian as Job was, because the first thing his friends mention here is, if your kids did this, and maybe part of this is because of the way they were living, here's what he said. If thy children have sinned against him, and he have cast them away for their transgression, if thou wouldest seek unto God betimes, and make thy supplication to the Almighty. He's saying, Job, maybe your kids did something wrong, and maybe it's because you've done something wrong, but if you'll stop right now, if you'll go to God and you'll ask him, I just want to point this out again. Listen, nobody in this room could ever sustain God giving you what you deserve. Couldn't do it. If it was not for a merciful God, we would all be in big trouble. I mean, big trouble. So if God turned our world upside down every time we deserved it, whew, now you couldn't deal with that. I mean, it'd be hard, right? And I'm glad that I don't have to. Now, your heart will let you know, but if somebody gets in an accident, I don't have to live and say, okay, what did I do wrong today? Or if my kids got in an accident, well, what did they do? I don't live under those kind of pressure from heaven, because I know God's a just God and he's a good God. I don't have to look behind everything that happens in my life and ask myself, is God mad at me? I don't have to do that. Because there's too many times, and I know you could probably point out, have you ever pointed out, you can see an area in your life where he should have done something different, but he didn't, and the grace of God was still there for you, right? All right, how many of you would say you're blessed? If you're blessed, give me an amen. In that same voice, you also had to ask God to forgive you. All right, so God gave enough people in this room to say amen, but even in weeks that we say we are blessed, we still sin that week, right? So, he's saying to Job, well, if you would do this even now, maybe God would turn. If thou wouldest seek unto God betimes and make thy supplication to the Almighty, if thou wert pure and upright. We already know Job's like that. We already know But now his friends, they're just looking at what he's going through, right? If thou wert pure and upright, surely now we would awake for thee and make the habitation of the righteous prosper. He's saying this, if there wasn't something wrong, and if you were pure and right, he would have already awakened unto thee. And again, we've already discussed this. It's best that we don't look into somebody's life and try to figure out what God is doing in somebody else's life. We might just better leave that alone to God, because we'll get it wrong. Pray for them. Don't assume, that is a God thing. And even if it's the judgment of God, do they not still deserve you to sit with them? Well, sure they do. Even if they deserve what they're getting, does the church family just leave them? No. No. That's not, if it's something God's doing in their heart and they have to go through a rough time, I should still be there for them. If it's got nothing to do with anything they did, I should still be there for them. And what God is doing is God's business with that person, and it's not my business. So it says in verse 7, though thy beginnings was small, yet the later end should greatly increase. When you look at the commentaries on this verse, the thought is, because now he's been just reduced to him and his wife, and that's a small thing compared to what he had before. It says, yet thy later end should greatly increase, if he were to stop and tell God and to confess. Now I know, because I know the rest of the story, I know at the end he is going to increase, but it's not because of something that he did that he's repented. It's because, he was faithful and he didn't sin through all this. He didn't curse God. Verse 8, for inquire, I pray thee, of the former age, and prepare thyself to the search of their fathers. He's saying, look back in history, look back in our fathers, and you can see the same thing. When somebody did something wrong, or when there was a bad thing in somebody's life, you could see that it had something to do with their actions. And he says, for I inquire, I pray thee, of the former age, and prepare thyself to search of their fathers. For we are but of yesterday, and know nothing, because our days upon earth are a shadow. Shall not they teach thee, and tell thee, and utter words out of their heart? Now, in verse 11, 12, 13, these are poems or sayings that they had in their time. And he's saying, look at this. This is what they said. Can the rush grow up without mire? Can the flag grow up without water? All right, so a rush is a reed, and he's saying it can't function unless it's in a swampy area. And, the flag, it can't grow without water. While it is yet in the greenness and not cut down, it withereth before any other herb. He's saying, even though, so they had a saying, even though that the reed has to grow in a marshy place, the second you take it out of there, or the second it begins, there's no rain, that reed cannot sustain itself. And that's a beautiful thing about God. We can't sustain, we're nothing without the goodness of God in our life. Nothing. You remove that out of our life, you don't withstand anything. The heat's too much. Well, we got to have God. You remove that. So what is the difference between you and somebody that's lost? What's the difference? You've got God. Now, we're both still, a lost person's a sinner, right? Are saved people sinners? Yeah, we both sin, right? Now, you would hope less, at least, correct? Right? So we're not perfect. The difference is we have a relationship with the Lord. That's the only reason why we don't wither. It's because we've got that water. You take that water away from me, and I'm just a dried stalk. You take that water away from you, you're just a dried stalk. The second the second it has that absence, the second that it's missing, I don't have anything to lean on. So are the paths of all that forget God, and the hypocrite's hope shall perish. He's saying, just like that reed, if you take it away from that water, it can't live. So are the paths of all that forget God, and the hypocrite's hope shall perish. Now he's saying, Job, I think the problem is you're a hypocrite. You know, you act like you're this super Christian, but look at what this is doing in your life. You have to have something wrong. But now what we can take away from it is this for sure, is that being a hypocrite would cause that dryness. You can be something on the outside, but unless there is meaning on the inside, then there's no value to it, right? You know, God is very gracious and kind to somebody who's honest. So those two people that were praying, the Pharisee and the publican. The Pharisee would pray and he would say these words. And he says, God, I pray thee and I thank you that I'm not like the publicans. Now what a crazy thing for a Christian to say. He's praying to God and he says these words, God, I'm thankful that I'm not like those other people, right? So God hears that prayer, and then he hears the publican praying, and that guy's, smoting his chest, and he's saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. And God looks down and says, I am more pleased with that man's prayer than this man's prayer, because this guy cannot see himself for who he is. He's just, he can't see. But then somebody over here that says, listen, if you want to find fault in me, you can do that. Because I am a sinner. And that person cry out to God and say, be merciful to me, and you're honest about that, goes a million miles more than somebody who just, outwardly does that, but inwardly won't admit it. And he's saying that's the way a hypocrite is. So are the paths of all that forget God, and the hypocrite's hope shall perish. Whose hope shall be cut off, and whose trust shall be a spider's web. If you lean on a spider's web, you're going to put your hand right through it. He shall lean upon his house, but it shall not stand. He shall hold it fast, but it shall not endure. Again, he's talking about a reed. You take that reed out of water, that reed's nothing. That same person who is hypocritical, who is not true and honest in his walk with the Lord, who doesn't have any foundation, his house won't stand. There's no endurance there. It's not able to go on. It said, he shall lean upon his house, but his house shall not stand. He shall hold it fast, but it shall not endure. He is green before the sun, and his branch shooteth forth his garden. His roots are wrapped about the heap, and seeth the place of stones. If he destroy him from his place, then it shall deny him, saying, I have not seen thee. Again, just talking about, we know in Psalms it says that if you're the godly are like those that are planted by the rivers of water, and their roots go down and they get that drink from the water. It says the ungodly are not so. They're like the chaff that the wind blows away. But even Christians that are not grounded, their lives are one way and then their heart's another, there's also no depth there either. And they can't sustain the things of this world. Down in verse 19, behold, this is the joy of his way, and out of the earth shall others grow. So, as he withers away, God just brings up somebody else. Behold, God will not cast away a perfect man, neither will he help the evildoers. Now, you can say yes and you can say no to that verse. What does God say about the rain? Falls on the what? The just and the unjust. So, God can be good to evildoers. Do you know that if he wanted to, everybody that's not a Christian could go financially bankrupt tomorrow? If God wanted that. In fact, David said this. One of the things that got David in a little bit of trouble is David would look out and he would see the wicked and they would prosper. And he's like, hey, this doesn't make any sense. I'm over here trying to do right, and they're prospering. It doesn't seem like, everything they do is successful until he went to the house of the Lord and he realized their end. Their end is they're going to spend eternity in hell. And then he said, now, wait a minute. That is not true. Yes, sometimes you will see that God does bless people that don't deserve it in your mind. I mean, rich people. People that don't even believe in God. They seem that maybe they've got easier roads. So, yes, sometimes that does happen. And then it says this, behold, God will not cast away a perfect man. Now, he will not cast away that perfect man forever, but many preachers have preached this message before. Why do bad things happen to good people? I know you've heard that sermon topic because every pastor, you know why you preach that? Because something happens in a church where you see a good family really go through a bad struggle. And when you see that and you look at it, a mom loses a baby that's 2 or 3 years old, and you think, why? Why did that happen? Or you see, a pastor, his kid will get in an accident, or a missionary on a foreign field, something will happen, and you'll say, man, these are good people. Why does bad things happen to good people? Because remember what I told you last week, that's when God is writing that story. And that's why that happens. But now, he is not going to forsake them forever. That part is true. When he says here, it says, behold, God will not cast away a perfect man, not forever. What you will see in those stories, you will see at the end of the day. One day you'll be able to look back and you'll be able to go, I knew a lady came to me one time, she had a miscarriage. And when she was going through that miscarriage, she talked to Maggie. Well, Maggie's had 2 miscarriages. One of them, I was teaching junior church, and she was far enough along that she was visibly pregnant. Everybody knew she was pregnant. And I can't remember how far along she was. It had to be at least 4 months, maybe even a little bit longer than that. And I was teaching junior church. And I remember her coming back to that back door, and she was trying to get my attention. And I looked back there, and she was crying. So I had somebody take my place. I went back, and she said, hey, I got to go to the hospital. And let me tell you something. I sat in that hospital listening to those people call it a fetus, tell us that she ended up losing it. And it was to the point big enough to know what are you going to do with it, but they had already taken care of that. And I remember sitting there in that hospital room thinking, I think that back then I made $100 a week. And thinking, I went to Bible college, we surrendered it to the ministry. This is what I'm going to do my whole life. Why? What did I do to you? And immediately I could just feel God come to that room and say, listen, you're going to ask me? What if I were to say that when I had to watch my son die on that cross? Would I not be justified to say, listen, man, I'm a good God. I created heaven and earth. Why are you doing that to me? Man, God got a hold of my heart, and I just said, I'm sorry. Well, fast forwarded, a lady in our church, her husband was out on an oil rig and couldn't get back home. The weather was bad, and she's going through a miscarriage. So I watched the kids. Maggie went and spent a couple of days with her. She came back home, and I remember her looking at me, and she said, you know what? God gave me peace today about why I lost that baby. And she said, because I was able to hug on this lady's neck and tell her it's going to be okay. Now, at the time, you don't feel like that. I mean, at the time, you can't even understand that. You just can only deal with your own hurt and pain. But this is where God won't leave the story undone. You might not always get to see it, but he will not leave the righteous forsaken. He won't do that. And he will use that story. And in that story, It'll be a story of grace and mercy. You might not get to see it right then, but God's never going to do something to you like Job and never explain. Or there will be fruit from a good person going through bad things, that in the hand of an almighty God, good things can come out of bad things. That's what we got that the world doesn't have. That something good can come out of something bad. Heck, and when you're walking through it, have you ever been so emotionally beaten up that you are physically sick to your stomach? Where you think you're going to throw up. You don't have the flu, you just got immense grief. Have you ever not eaten for 3 or 4 days? 5 days? A month? Everybody around you, they don't know what's going on, but there's something in your life that is so heavy, you can't eat. Well, those are burdens that you carry, and you're just trying to figure out why. Right? Well, if you'll just put that in God's and know that He's not going to leave the righteous forsaken forever. And He can make something good come out of a bad event. And it said in verse 21, till He fill thy mouth with laughing and thy lips with rejoicing. Now He knows Job will, here's something else. When somebody is in a terrible, terrible thing, and they're going right in the middle of it, and you're thinking, what can I say to them? Here's what you can say to them, and this will always, you can look at that person, and no matter if it's a sinner that's backslidden and coming to God, or it's a Christian that they're just going through something. Here's what you can tell them. Rest assured, if you run to God, if you stay faithful, and if you'll lean on Him, here's what I can promise you. You will smile again. You might not smile right now, but if you're faithful and you don't walk away from Him and you keep looking at Him, you will smile again. I've seen people go through, a bad marriage, and they'll say, I'm never going to be happy. I'm never going to be happy again. And here's what I tell them. First one runs to Jesus wins. You may not want to hear it right now, but I promise you, you will smile again. If you just stay with Him. That's the key. And let Him do what He's doing. Because here's what He's saying here to Job. He's saying, till He fill thy mouth with laughing and thy lips with rejoicing. Job's he's thinking, nah, what are you talking to me about that for? Right? I don't feel like laughing right now. They that hate thee shall be clothed with shame. You know who that is? He's speaking prophecy about his own self. They that hate thee shall be clothed with shame, and the dwelling of the wicked shall come to naught. He's saying, but he's putting it on the premise of as long as Job repents. Well, he is true about this. Job is going to smile again. And God is going to humble these 3 people that were His friends, but not genuinely. They that hate thee shall be clothed with shame, and the dwelling place of the wicked shall come to naught. Let's see if we can get a little bit of chapter 9 done. Now in chapter 9, it's kind of a preview of what you're going to see at the end of Job. Listen to what Job says about God in chapter 9. So he hasn't lost all of his footing yet. In chapter 9, he says this, then Job answered and said, I know it is of a truth, but how should man be just with God? He's saying, I get it that, maybe I will smile again, he said, but it's in theory only right now, right? If he will contend with him, he cannot answer him one of 1,000. A man's not going to argue with God. And this is what he starts talking about God. Here's what Job still knows about God. He is wise in heart, mighty in strength. And he's sitting there full of boils. Now, in his mind, he's thinking, I must have done something. I must have done something. This is why this is happening. But he still knows the basic foundation that we all have to have. In good times and in bad times, this never changes in the heart of a believer. He is wise in heart and mighty in strength, who hath hardened himself against him and hath prospered. You can't harden yourself against God and win. You will fail. Which, and this is talking about God, which removeth mountains, and they know not, which overturneth them in his anger. This is who God is. I mean, he can remove a mountain and turn it upside down. Which shaketh the earth out of her place, and the pillars thereof tremble. Who commandeth the sun, and it rises not, and sealeth up the stars. What he is saying? He's saying is, listen, this is who God is. Even in this terrible journey he's going on, God did not get smaller. Which commandeth the sun, and it rises not, and sealeth up the stars. Which alone spreadeth out the heavens, and treadeth upon the waves of the sea. Which maketh Arcturus, Orion, and Pleiades, and the chambers of the south. Talking about the stars and the planets and solar systems beyond our solar system. Now this is just, I'm just going to throw this out. This is God. There are a lot of people that, some of them don't believe we landed on the moon. Some of them believe that we really don't even have satellites. I tend to think that we did, and who really cares, right? Because even they knew that God is beyond those stars. And as God lets men, for me, when I see stuff that the Hubble telescope shows, I get really excited. And I think he's out there. When I look at that moon, you know, you see the pictures of it, I think, my God made that. Right? And God made us. Now here's something that you got to remember about God. When he looked down, unless you don't believe every word of the Bible, he looked down at the Tower of Babel, and what did he say he had to do? He had to stop them. And he said, because if he doesn't, whatever their hand finds to do, they're going to achieve it. Now I'm thinking, seriously, you're going to build a tower to the heavens? He made us like him. If man could even unwind a little bit about how expansive your brain is, well, it's no big deal that you made cars. You look at a car. Do you know that car started out as a raw iron ore, and you're going to drive it home today? And that happened in the last 200 years. Everything in this room came from this planet, and a man made it. If we can do that, can you imagine what's really out there? You know, and what he is saying, man, he's saying, so when you enter a problem in your life, just tell yourself, the God that made one planet after the other, one solar system after the other, and could go beyond infinity, and it's still being made, he can do that. I can trust him, right? That's what he's saying. Okay, which commandeth the sun to rise, it said, verse 10, which doeth great things. Look, here's a good verse even in Job, this is a good verse to remember. Which doeth great things, past finding out, yea, and wonders without number. And put that on your fridge. You got a rough day and you figure out how you're going to make it down there, you just know this. When you pray, you're praying to a God that is extremely capable. For sure. Which doeth great things, past finding out, yea, wonders without number. Lo, he goeth by me, and I see him not. Boy, that's humbling. Do you think that God himself, that he is powerful enough that his Spirit could actually go right by you? That God has visited your home and your house? Could it be possible that God's Spirit could actually be in your home? Well, sure. He can go wherever he wants. Can God be in more than one place at the same time? Absolutely. Yeah, and once you know he's God, well, that's why you can say, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. It's one more, and we'll stop and pick it up past this. Lo, he goeth by me, I see him not. He passes on also, but I perceive him not. That's the problem. Sometimes God's there and we can't perceive that he is. Too busy, not listening. Don't have eyes to see or ears to hear. It'd be sad to have God, like when Samuel was praying, he was just a young boy. He was in Eli's house. And in the quiet of the night, he heard these words, Samuel. He heard it, but he didn't know who was doing it. So he goes out there and he tells Eli, hey, you called me? And Eli's like, I didn't call you. Go back to bed. So he goes back to bed. He gets in there and he starts almost ready to nod off. He hears this again, Samuel. He does that a couple of times. Then Eli, even though Eli's own kids weren't where they needed to be, Eli has heard God. And all of a sudden it dawned on him. I know who that is. He said, Samuel, the next time you hear that voice, say, speak, Lord, your servant heareth. There's times when God's wanted you to be aware of his presence and we're not. Got so much noise going on. Can't even identify it. And we need to ask God, please, Lord, I don't ever want you to be that close and me not even recognize you're there. I want to respect that. I want you to be able to talk. I want to recognize that you are there. And Job's saying, what he's saying is, I'm going to get to heaven. You know, what's that song, that Footprints in the Sand, that little poem, where the guy says, Lord, we were walking together, and then every time it was hard in my life, I looked down at the sand, and there's only one set of footprints. I remember hearing this when I was a kid. Didn't quite understand it as much as I do now. And in this poem, God says, well, there's only one set of footprints. It's because I was carrying you. How many times has God carried you and you didn't even know it? And he's there when you didn't give him credit for it. And what Job is saying is, even though this is a dark time, he is saying these things. I know you've passed by. I can't see it. I know that you've spoken, but I can't hear it. But I'm still trusting. He didn't give up on him yet. He wasn't going to give in. He wasn't going to give that up. Brother Gary, can you close us in prayer tonight? Would you be willing?